All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. Sorry for the late start. We were having some technical difficulties. Looking forward to when we get our whole new camera stuff set up, and hopefully that will enable us to overcome some of these technical difficulties. Well, Shabbat Shalom. It is Friday, February the 14th, so also happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And it is Friday, February the 14th, 2025. We are in our Parsha, going through our Torah portions. We are in Parsha Yitro, or Jethro, and this morning we're going to be looking at Exodus 19. Just want to remind everyone, if you just take a moment, if you're on Facebook or if you're on YouTube, just hit like if you would. Just hit like if you like our daily manna every day, and that'll help just kind of get in front of more people. Even if there's just a few of us, the more the likes, the better. And if you haven't subscribed, we encourage you to subscribe. If you haven't downloaded our app, download the app. Go to the Apple App Store, type in Shalom AZ, and you can download that. And it's a great resource. And I love this feature on there when you go down to the Bible and you're reading it, that any of the videos that we have that are connected with that passage says media available. Anyway, it's great. My Antonio is the one who has built that app and continues to, or he's worked with the company that we work with to build that app, and he continues to work on that. So I'm so thankful for what a great job that he has done on that and is doing on that. And all right, well, we have a lot to cover this morning, and the question of whether or not we're obviously not going to be, we're going to go through Exodus 19, okay? So, but we're going to end up reading a lot of it near the end because there's a lot of different things that we're going to talk about this morning. The title of today's Daily Manna is A New Covenant at Sinai. A new covenant at Sinai, and so we're going to be looking at that. So Exodus 19, beginning in verse 1, it says, "In the third month after the Bnei Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, that same day they arrived at the wilderness, or at the desert of Sinai." So we're given a specific date here, which introduces, this is a special event. This is a notable event. Now, we have been given other dates along the way. Of course, the first month, the beginning of the year, was in the month of Nisan. The Passover, that evening, is the 14th of Nisan. And so, basically, that next day, that night is when they left. So, going into that next day, that is, that's when this has begun. And the second month was marked in Exodus 16, just before they were given manna for the first time, right? So we read in Exodus 16:1, they journeyed on from Elim, and the entire community of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after leaving the land of Egypt. So they're in the midway point. They're halfway to Sinai. A month later, they're here. And so Professor Casuto from the Hebrew University, he says, usually the biblical narrative will say something like, "And it came to pass in the third month after their exodus," which would have been simple prose. But he points out in a way that I can't describe how the rhythm in Hebrew of these first two verses is poetic. There's a poetry that's at work here. It's literal, but it's poetic. This is a very special passage that we're coming on. And the mention of the third new moon is not unintentional. So that we see that it is Rosh Chodesh. It's the new moon. So since the Exodus from Egypt, you have the last 2 weeks of Nisan, and then you have the 4 weeks of ER that had passed, and now we are in total the 7th week. And so since 7 is considered a number of completeness, a number of perfection, 7 days constituted a totality, a unit of time, right? And so 7 weeks formed still a higher unit. So just as after you have 6 days of work, the 7th day brought rest and the enjoyment of that labor. So after 6 weeks of journeying through the desert, the 7th week brings them right into the mountain of God. The 7th week brings them to this place of drawing nearer to the Lord, in a place of in His presence, right? And the timing of this is, by the way, and we're given that specific time. This is why the tradition developed to celebrate the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot, Pentecost, in conjunction to celebrate the giving of the Torah on Shavuot, right? Remember, the Feast of Weeks is 7 weeks and a day after Passover, right? So while the Torah doesn't state that the exact day on which the revelation on Mount Sinai occurred, the time frame, we can infer that it was around 7 weeks based on this time frame. And so that's why on Shavuot we have on Pentecost the remembering of the giving of the Torah, and we talk about a lot of that during Shavuot, which is usually at the end of May, beginning of June, something like that. Verse 2, they traveled from Rephidim, came into the wilderness of Sinai, and set up camp in the wilderness. Israel camped there right in front of the mountain, right in front of the mountain. And so this is where it's in this area that they've been with Jethro. So whether he encountered them down here at the bottom of the mountain, but because we just got that story in verse 18. And so Moses was coming back to the mountain, right? They're camped in front of the mountain. The reason he's coming back to the mountain of God, is because the Lord had told him, right? The Lord had reassured him when he met the Lord there for the first time, and God called him, right? God called him the fiery and the burning bush to go and to let my people go. And the Lord had said in Exodus 3:12, he said, so I will surely be with you, and this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. So Moses is back at that mountain. The Lord has delivered them, and he is there to worship the Lord. And so now that the people have come out, he's arrived at the mountain, he immediately went up to God. He went up. The invitation had been given in Exodus 3:12. He didn't wait for a new invitation. This was the deal. So verse 3, Moses went up to God, and Adonai called to him from the mountain, saying, say this to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, tell Israel's kids. Here's what you're to tell. Make known that tell, that say this, the tell B'nai Yisrael. That word tell is neged, which means to reveal, disclose, make this known, put this in front of the children of Israel. So basically then what we have here is the beginning of what we call the Mosaic covenant. The covenant of Moses, the law of Moses, as it were. Covenants, agreements, as it were, alliances, so to speak, were common in the ancient world as they are today. There were different kinds of covenants or treaties, agreements between peoples and nations. There was a kind that would be like a parity treaty, a covenant, an agreement between equal kingdoms, equal parties that would enter into an oath-bound agreement. Hey, we've got your back, you've got our back. Then there were what were called the suzerainty treaties, the suzerain vassal treaty, in which the suzerain was in the ancient Near East was the greater ruler. And then you had, so you would have a greater ruler, a greater kingdom, and a lesser kingdom. And the greater ruler there would be an agreement between them. And the lesser ruler would subordinate himself and his kingdom, basically becoming like a vassal. And in those treaties, there are formal elements that can actually be seen in this kind of covenant, in this kind of agreement that the Lord is making. There was in the ancient treaties, you had a preamble, which is just the introduction of the more powerful leader would say, these are the words of so and so. And then there would be the historical prologue, which would the past beneficent deeds that the powerful one has done toward the lesser. And then you would have stipulations. So first of all, the lesser, the vassal, owes allegiance to the overlord. And in the same way that we'll see here that Israelites vow to have no other lord but Adonai. And then second, the stipulations require the subordinate to meet specific demands that are listed. Right? So that would then become the entirety of the Sinai covenant. The commands, the rulings, laws, judgments would be stipulations of the Sinai covenant. And it would be in the ancient world, and that treaty would be deposited in a sacred place, the ark, and then there would be witnesses. And we'll see at the very end when we get to Deuteronomy, at the end of Deuteronomy, today I call heaven and earth. I call as witnesses. And the Lord called today, choose life that you and your children may live. Now, here's the deal. And because what we're going to read here in the next verses, and these next verses 4, 5, and 6 really are this is the center point. This is the key that's being expressed. So we have this sort of opening to the covenant, the prologue, the listing of what has been done, and a command that I need. You're gonna do what I say. I need you to hear and do. But this is not. But we also understand that the children of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are in covenant with God. Right? In Genesis 15, we saw that God cut a covenant with Abraham. The word berit, the covenant, it has the idea of to cut. It's in cutting. It's from the word karat, to cut a covenant. And so the cutting of a covenant, when we see here in Genesis 15, there was a sacrifice that was made that Avram walked between. So let's look at, just read through Genesis 15, beginning in verse 4. Then behold, the word of Adonai came to Avram, saying, this one, speaking of Eleazar, his servant, will not be your heir, but in fact, one who will come from your own body will be your heir. He took him outside and said, look up now at the sky and count the stars, if you're able to count them. And then he said to him, so shall your seed be. Verse 6, and he believed in Adonai. He amened Adonai. He trusted in the faithfulness of Adonai. And he reckoned it to him as righteousness. Verse 7, then he said to him, I am Adonai, who brought you out from Ur of the Chaldeans in order to give you this land to inherit it. So he said, my Lord, Adonai, how will I know that I will inherit it? And then he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old young cow, a 3-year-old she-goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young bird. So he brought all these to him and cut them in half and put each piece opposite the other. But he did not cut the birds. So cut the animals in half and then each piece opposite the other. So there's a pathway between. The birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, but Avram drove them away. When the sun was about to set and a deep sleep fell on Avram, behold, terror of great darkness was falling upon him. Then he, Adonai, said to Avram, know for certain that your seed will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and they will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. But I'm going to judge the nation that they will serve. Afterward, they will go out with many possessions, but you will come to your fathers in peace. You will be buried at a good old age. Then in the 4th generation, they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun set and it became dark, behold, there was a smoking oven and a fiery torch that passed between these pieces. So the Lord passes between these pieces in affirming the covenant in this way. And anyway, on that day, Adonai cut a covenant with Avram, saying, I give this land to your seed from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, the Kenite, the Kenizzites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, Perizzites, and Rephaites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So in this initial covenant, Genesis 15, what was the stipulation for Avram? What had he even done? Well, it simply at this point was he believed God. That's all he did. And then of course in that belief was followed by obedience, but it was about trust. So years later, there's then more information. There's more to the covenant. There's an additional covenant now. Now, this first part has been totally it's like the Lord says, you're going to be in slavery. Your ancestors will be for 400 years. This is the deal, but I'm going to bring you out. You're going to have descendants like the stars in the sky. And later, there's another part of the covenant, Genesis 17, when Avram was 99 years old, Adonai appeared to Avram. He said to him, I am El Shaddai. Continually walk before me, and you will be blameless. My heart's desire is to make my covenant between me and you, and then I will multiply you exceedingly much. Avram fell on his face, verse 3, and God spoke with him, saying, for my part, because my covenant is with you, you will be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer will your name be Avram, but your name will be Avraham, because I will make you the father of a multitude of nations. Again, he's 99, so the son of this promise has not even been born, the one. And the Lord is saying, I'm going to make you a multitude, father of a multitude of nations. Yes, I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings will come forth from you. Yes, I will establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, in order to be your God and your seed's God after you. I will give to you and to your seed and after you the land where you are an outsider, the whole land of Canaan as an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Verse 9, God also said to Abraham, as for you, my covenant you must keep, you and your seed after you throughout your generations. This is my covenant that you must keep between me and you and your seed after you. All your males must be circumcised. You must circumcise in the flesh of your foreskin, and this will become a sign of the covenant between me and you. Also, your 8-day-old males must be circumcised, every male throughout your generations, including a houseborn servant or a servant bought with money from any foreigner who is not of your seed. Your houseborn slave and your purchased slave must surely be circumcised, so my covenant will be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. So here we have the covenant of circumcision. So even within God's covenantal promises to Abraham, the Lord made clear, though they would be enslaved, here's the cutting of the covenant in this regard. There's a cutting that is occurring with circumcision, and so the Lord says, I'll bring you out of the land, I'll give you the land, I'll make you exceedingly fruitful. Right? So that's happened. And so now the next part of the covenant is to be expressed. Right? You say, well, why? Why must Israel and Adonai enter into a new covenant? Didn't the Lord already promise Israel's ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they would have many ancestors, or descendants, and that they would have Canaan? And so now the realization of what God has said would happen, the people are a teeming multitude, that has come to pass. And so what we're really observing here is a progressive revelation in regard to covenant, into what God is doing. He knows so he doesn't lay out everything in advance. He gives, but everything that he said would happen has happened. And when that happens, then he says, next. Right? And so this now, one could say, which is why I titled this is to say, one could say a new covenant at Sinai. Or you could say now, is it because that's why it's called the Mosaic covenant. It's recognized as something that is previously before unknown, that is now being made known. And there are other promises, other covenants still to come. Right now, there's no when we go through the law, there will be there. It doesn't. The original plan isn't for there to be a king. God would be king, but he also knows the way things are going to roll. So then he makes a covenant with David, right? And about that his descendant, one of his descendants, will be on the throne forever. And then later, of course, with Israel having never been able to keep their end of the covenant that we now encounter, there will be a new covenant. And still, it's a covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Jeremiah 31, the prophet Jeremiah says to the people of Judah, says to the people of Israel, behold, days are coming, declares Adonai, when I will make a new covenant. He says this to the exiles. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel. So he's saying this and with the house of Judah. So he's saying this to Judah. He's saying this to exiles who are in exile because they have repeatedly broken the covenant over the course of centuries that we're about to encounter. I'm going to make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. For they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them, declares Adonai. But this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares Adonai. I will put my Torah within them. Yes, I will write it on their heart. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will each teach his neighbor or each his brother, saying, Know Adonai, for they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares Adonai. For I will forgive their iniquity, their sin I will remember no more. Thus says Adonai, who gives the sun as a light by day, and the fixed order of the moon, and the stars as a light by night, and stirs up the sea so its waves roar. Adonai Tzevaot is his name. Only if this fixed order departs from before me, declares Adonai, then also might Israel's offspring cease from being a nation before me for all time. Thus says Adonai, only if heaven above can be measured and the foundations of the earth searched out beneath, then also I will cast off the offspring of Israel for all they have done, declares Adonai. So even in the new covenant, there is an eternal commitment God makes until he gives Israel. He calls Israel to be his people, to turn to him, to call on him, to walk on with him, till time on this earth is no more. Right? So the commitment, but here now we're getting ahead of ourselves. I am. Here now begins the covenant, which is referred to in Jeremiah 31, where he says it's like the covenant. This is not like the covenant I made with their fathers the day I took them by the hand. This is the covenant he made with their fathers when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. So, verse 4, he says, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. So first of all, you've seen it. The Israelites had seen it all, right? They knew firsthand. It's not like Jethro where they were being told what happened to someone else. He says, you saw what I did to those in Egypt. You saw what happened to those holding you in captivity over and over and over again. You saw how I brought you out, how I carried you. I lifted you up. I lifted you up on eagle's wings. Right? This metaphor of safeguarding them, carrying them away out of the reach of others to a place where they could not be reached. And you have seen, third, that I brought you to myself. Right? They had experienced the guardianship of the one who is infinitely stronger, more capable than any of them, and now they found that they had been brought into his presence, not because of anything they had done. He says, I brought you to myself. Right? These are things the Lord has already done. Here are the benefits. You've seen what I did to Egypt. You see how I bore you on eagle's wings. You see how I brought you to myself. Since you see that I am Lord of the whole world, you can understand. Now pay attention to what I'm saying to you. He says, and now, va'ata, which is now listen. He says, if you shema. He says, im shema tishma. If you will listen and heed, hear and heed, listen closely to my voice, and you keep or watch as a guardman, as a watchman, a guard, my covenant, then you will be to me a treasured possession, or my own treasure. We'll talk about this word in a minute, segula, which is like the crown jewel from among all the people, for all the earth is mine. It's all mine, he says. I'm calling you, he says, that you'll be my treasured possession if you'll listen. So there's a conditionality that is at work here, and yet what follows is his love for them remains. The commitment God shows to his people, but he is calling them to something. You will be my segula, my treasured possession. It pointed to property that one had the exclusive right of possession. You will be my treasured people, and this is repeated in Deuteronomy 7:6 and 14:2 and 26:18 and 19. And you, verse 6, and you yourselves, you will be for me, or to me, a kingdom of priests, a kingdom of Kohanim, and a holy nation. And then he tells Moses, these are the words you're to speak to the children of Israel. So you'll be my treasured possession. And you're going to function as a kingdom of priests. You're going to this phrase isn't used elsewhere in the Hebrew scriptures until we get some very similar in Isaiah 61:6, when which of course is the passage. Isaiah 61 is what Yeshua quotes when he goes in the synagogue today. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to bring good news, right, and he's anointed me to bring good news to the captive, healing to the hurting, sight to the blind, healing for the broken. And there's going to be this great exchange. And then he says, you will be called Kohanim of Adonai, these that he changes. But this, you will be a kingdom of priests, which, it implies a king. A kingdom implies a king, and the only king here is Adonai. But your goal, so your function, though, will be as a kingdom of priests to be an intermediary, to bring people to me. That's your goal, and you will be a holy nation, a set-apart nation. It says you will be a goy, a kadosh, goy, a goy kadosh. Normally, goy refers to the other nations, but here now you're going to be a nation, a people, a nation that is set apart, that is holy. That you will be. There's a uniqueness here because of your role of being a kingdom of priests, and you will be a holy nation. You'll be dedicated to me, right? And then there is, but all of this opened with a very significant if you will shema. And the obedience is really, it's not our part in a two-sided bargain. It's a grateful response to what the Lord has already done. He's saying, you see who I am. You see who I am. You see how I brought you. You see what happens, what I did to the oppressors. You don't want to be like that. You see how I carried you out. You see how I brought you to myself. I've shown you how trustworthy I am. He's talking to this multitude now that he had promised Abraham would be. And so I'm trustworthy, so now I need you to, knowing who I am, to listen to me. And we're going to do great things. You're going to be to me, especially my treasured possession. He later says, in Deuteronomy, he goes, look, I didn't choose you because you were the biggest. I didn't choose you because I chose you because of my love for you and because of my promise to Abraham. There's a mystery within God's choosing that can only be good and perfect and wise. So Moses went, we'll move quickly now. Moses went, called for the elders of the people, and put before them all these words that Adonai had commanded him. Verse 8, all the people answered together and said, everything that Adonai has spoken, we will do. And then Moses reported the words of the people to Adonai. So Moses comes down, he reports this to the elders, it goes to all the people, and they say, yeah, whatever he says, we'll do. It's really an impulsive response, right? Because it's uninformed at this point by what he's going to require of them. They don't know yet what the Lord would say. But they say, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? Whatever you say, I'll do. And it's the right impulse, by the way. It's not a wrong impulse. The Lord has shown them who he is. He has revealed to them who he is. So if he instructs them to do something, the call is trust who he is. That he knows what he's doing, that everything that he's doing is for good. So as his priests, as a kingdom of priests, as a nation set apart, as a nation that is a people that are loved, walk in his ways, demonstrate his ways to a watching world. Right? The impulse should become a way of life of saying, whatever you say, Lord, we will do. And not to have to measure it out. Will I, won't I? Whatever you say, I'll do. They pledged obedience to what they don't even know the Lord will require of them. And everything that he requires is for their good, is for our good. And so the impulse is the right impulse. Everything the Lord says we'll do. And so Moses goes, okay. And it's interesting. It is interesting to me that then Moses, functioning as an intermediary, then goes up the mountain and tells the Lord, as though the Lord doesn't know, but the Lord knows, and yet there is this manner in which things occur where Moses is functioning as this intermediary. Verse 9, I'm just going to read through these, through the rest of this, and then we'll... Adonai said to Moses, I'm about to come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people will hear when I speak with you and believe you. Then Moses told the words of believe you forever. So the Lord is saying, here, I'm myself, I'm coming to you. And he says it with great emphasis, use the words Anoki, I myself, I alone am coming to you. But I'm going to do this in front of the people to validate who you are. So they'll know and they will believe you forever. They're going to trust what you're saying forever. I want them to know that where this comes from. This isn't you making something up. This is coming from me. Then Moses told the words of the people. And so the Lord says this, and Moses says, okay, well, they said they'll do whatever you say. So Adonai, verse 10, said to Moses, go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothing. Let them kind of pound their garments, beat their garments. Get ready, get clean. And be ready, he says, be prepared, ready for the third day. Right? For on the third day Adonai will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people, to the eyes of all the people. Right? So there's a third day here again. There's which we have seen. Here's the third day in the third month, and we've seen the third day previously. So there's a significance to these things. They're not random. And of course, when Abraham journeyed to sacrifice Isaac, it was the third day. But the Lord is giving them time to prepare, to be prepared. There's an awareness of the reality of the Lord's holiness is not something that there's a fear and a reverence and an awe that should always be in place, and we see that here. He says you're to set boundaries for the people all around, saying be very careful not to go up onto the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain will surely be put to death. There is whether or not they would have understood at the time, but the awareness of God's purity and his holiness and our uncleanness. And this is protective. This is rooted in love because of everything the Lord wants to teach, and he wants to guard and protect the people. He says not a hand is to touch it, but he will surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it's an animal or a man, it will not live. When the shofar sounds, they may come up to the mountain. And Moses went down from the mountain to the people, consecrated them, and then they washed their clothing. So everything he says, he's going back and forth, and then they do it. He said to the people, be ready for the third day, and don't draw near to your wives. In the morning of the third day, there was thundering and lightning, a thick cloud on the mountain, and the blast of an exceedingly loud shofar. Terrified all the people. All the people in the camp trembled. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the lowest part of the mountain. Now the entire Mount Sinai was in smoke, because Adonai had descended upon it in fire. The smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace. The whole mountain quaked greatly. So we saw the furnace and the smoke, the fire that went through at the covenant with Abraham, right? We see the fire in the covenant now. We later see the Lord come in with fire in the covenant, when the temple is dedicated, and then we see when the Holy Spirit comes upon those waiting on Shavuot, right? On Shavuot, which would be when they were remembering even this event, on the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit descended upon them, and there were tongues of fire upon each of them, right? And that's a unique event. Like when you're baptized, when you're filled with the Holy Spirit, when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon you, I don't walk around with, there's not fire upon our head. That there was a unique event for something that the Lord was doing. And so you see this relationship there. When the sound of the shofar, verse 19, grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him with a thunderous sound. Then Adonai came down onto Mount Sinai, to the top of the mountain. Adonai called Moses to the top of the mountain, so Moses went up. Then Adonai said to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to see Adonai and many of them die. Even the priests, the Kohanim, who come near to Adonai must consecrate themselves so that Adonai does not break out against them. Moses said to Adonai, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai. You are the one who warned us, saying, set boundaries around the mountain and consecrate it. He's like, I did what you said. They're not coming. We put up a boundary. They can't come. And just so you know, and Adonai said to him, go down, you're to come back up, you and Aaron with you, but do not let the Kohanim and the people break through to come up to Adonai, or he will break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them, stay back. And so then we will come then to Exodus 20, to the 10 words or the 10 commandments. All right, well, so what we see here, though, is the progressive revelation, and even the covenant at Sinai was a new covenant. There was more that the Lord was revealing. There was more that he was calling them to do, to be, and it was all for their good, and that they would be a kingdom of priests, right? And though he knows that they will not be able to fulfill the covenant, he also knows that there are steps that need to be. The Lord, in his brilliance, in his wisdom, in his eternal just perfection, knows perfectly the steps of a great teacher, and how the words that are written on tablets of stone ultimately that the issue becomes the issue of our hearts, and that's what he's going to have to deal with. But he doesn't jump. Just like he didn't jump to the 10th plague, there were steps. He doesn't jump and get ahead. There are steps, there's order, there's process to get to where then when Yeshua comes, when he comes to be the sacrifice, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, and it points back to everything the Lord's been teaching us all along. He's been preparing us to understand the fullness of what he will do, and still there's so much that we can't begin to possibly fully grasp, but he is good. And so there's just a wisdom in his covenant. All right, well, I know that I've gone long. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Happy February 14th. Shabbat Shalom. Don't forget service tomorrow at 10:30. All right, so may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.